So just so everybody knows what our process is, I'd be like, you got anything for the podcast? And you're like, I got it. The outcome is not the outcome.
Yeah.
And that's as much prep as I've done.
So I went on a walk today, as I do, and I'm listening to, I'm doing something I don't normally do. I'm listening to a book and I'm reading the same book. And I'm doing that because sometimes when I'm listening to the book, it's Rick Rubin's book about the creative way of being.
And who's Rick Rubin for those people?
Rick Rubin is a music producer.
Like one of the most famous ones.
He's super interesting. Like his process is super interesting. And he's not a musician, by the way.
Yeah.
And he's not even a producer. Like he will say, I don't know how to run the board or anything.
I think he's being a little.
Do you think he's being
I think he knows how to run the board.
Okay. Well, he claims to be very hands-off, but what he helps people with is finding the essence of what they want to share. So he's a creative who really, I found him to be really inspirational because you know how last week, Todd, we talked about that, spirituality and how we used to talk a lot about spirituality, and that's still a really big part of my life. But I've kind of, my friend Annie and I were talking about this on Friday. I've integrated it and kind of rolled it into lots of other aspects of humanity where I don't talk about it as being a separate thing. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of part of the everyday process. What that means though, is sometimes it's like, it's harder for me to find spiritual self-help books that really speak to me anymore because they seem to be so esoteric, and this is going to be really interesting. I don't know how people feel about me saying this, but sometimes when a book is written by someone who's really 20 years younger than me, it's not that I don't think the book isn't good. It's just there's so many life experiences I've had beyond that it doesn't speak to me the way that maybe it used to when I was 30.
Yeah.
And so it's not about knowing more. It's just about having life experience that's different. And so I'm reading this book and listening to Rick Rubin's book, and it's tapping into that thing that I've really been missing, which is, our sense of, creativity and our spiritual sense and our essence and our unique self, and how to bring that out in creative projects. And he, as a musician, or he's not a musician, but he is a music producer, talks a lot about writing music and lyrics, but it's the same with writing books, which is why I'm using it. Cause I'm writing a book right now, and I'm trying to not cater to the industry so much and trying to write something that I really believe. And that can be hard to do because there's a lot of boundaries around it. You know what I mean? But he's really inspiring me. And he is I don't think there's anybody like him. Do you know what I mean, Todd? Like, can you think of anybody who's like Rick Rubin?
A world that I don't quite really understand that much. I mean, I know a few music producers, and I don't know what their process is versus, Blood, who produced U2's Octoon Baby and produced a bunch of Good Pumpkins albums, or
like Max Martin, who did all the Backstreet Boys and Britney Spears and even some work to Taylor Swift. Like, there are people who can do pop songs.
And then isn't there George Martin? Wasn't he like the big guy for the Beatles?
Maybe.
Yeah.
So what, if you've ever seen listen to Rick Rubin be interviewed, or if you've ever seen him, he was on 60 Minutes, and he's kind of he's had some he's
been doing it long enough where people are just starting to write stories,
talk about him. And he will literally just sit and meditate and listen to the musician and lay back and close his eyes, and he can feel something that's not real and something that feels new and innovative. And he's always been on the cutting edge. What he tries to promote in, all of the artists that he works with is, who are you now? Just do now. Don't try to recreate something that you did before. Don't try and work an old pattern. Don't do things because your audience wants it. Who are you now? And what do you want to share? And what he talks about that I believe in deeply, and, people who listen to this show know I say this all the time, you're not doing it for the likes and the notoriety and all those things. You're doing it because it feels right to you. And if you are in alignment with your work, then you are experiencing what everybody's looking for: meaning, intention, sharing of your deepest self. Like, people who are just chasing the money and the next contract and the next, big thing, you're missing the part that everybody's looking for.
So, do you think these guys were looking for the next big contract?
Will rock you. He will roll you. Baby, go. My hero, your soul.
What do you think Rick Rubin would have done with these guys?
Today, he probably wouldn't have been able to keep his eyes.
Me
Now, I don't
Tomorrow.
all day, all night. You feel my heat. Feel my heat. I think we should repeat that again.
I think you should.
Feel my heat. Feel my heat.
Were we rolling
Yeah.
on that?
We're,
It's definitely
we're
cool.
recording.
Let's lay it down.
Let's lay it down. We're thinking about maybe doing that for pop culturing.
And that, for those of you who don't know, that was from Boogie Nights.
Yeah.
That was Mark Wahlberg and John C. Reilly. It's like when Mark Wahlberg has to he's really mad and doing a lot of drugs and he needs to bust away from the porn world and he decides he's going to cut an album.
Yeah.
And they think they're really good.
There's some great scenes in that movie when they're trying to make music.
And what I love about that whole thing is John C. Reilly. What's his name? Rockwell? No, Chester Rockwell is his
Chester.
fake name.
Yeah.
What's his real name?
I don't know. He looks like Han Solo though.
He does. People tell him. So he's so supportive
Yeah.
of Dirk.
Oh, when we take a deep dive into Boogie Nights, it's going to be interesting.
I know. I just love their friendship.
Yeah.
He so has his back. He's not even jealous when he comes into the porn industry. It's a
No.
whole thing. Anyway. So no, I don't think Rick Rubin worked with them,
Probably not.
unless that's really their essence. And he's like, give it a go.
Well, my last question is, I know Mark Wahlberg is not the best singer in the world,
No.
but he can sing.
Yeah, I think.
And was he trying to sound really
yes,
bad?
yes, for
Is
sure.
it easy to sound bad if you're a good
Sure.
singer?
Sure. Well, no, let me say, I don't know because I am not one of those.
Whoa, sweetie, you are.
No. I'm not a singer. I love to sing, but there are people who understand how to sing. Like my daughter is taking singing lessons and she's learning how to breathe and she's doing, she's been singing her whole life.
Yeah.
And where I am just we would call me a singing in the car,
Or
singing in the shower type
How
girl.
come you don't sing in the shower?
I do sometimes.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh,
And then karaoke, I like to do duets.
oh yeah. That's good stuff.
Duets are great because then you're not the only one up there. Anyway.
I'm going to bring you 3 different ideas when I heard your topic today is the outcome is not the outcome.
And just so you know why we've gotten here is Rick Rubin said this in his book. And I came to you and said, I love this sentence.
So think about this. The outcome is not the outcome.
Correct.
It could mean that the result may not be as important as the process or the journey.
Okay.
Okay. The second idea I had is that it's unpredictable. The outcome itself is unpredictable and can change or evolve over time.
Okay.
And then lastly is that the outcome itself just may be ambiguous. There may be no clarity. Whereas when I think of outcome, I'd be like black and white, yes or no. Like we made it, we won, we lost. Whereas sometimes even when you win, you lose, or even when you
Right.
lose, you win. So those are my 3 ideas.
Yeah, I think all of them represent what he's trying to say. I think where he was going with it is sometimes we have a story. And I kind of want to dive into Don Miguel Ruiz's second, in his book, The 4 Agreements, the second agreement is don't take anything personally. And he kind of talks about this. So I'll put a pin in that for a second and go back to it. But when there's an outcome, let's say as parents, something happens with our children, they make a team, they don't make a team, they get an A, they get a D, whatever it may be, we're like, that's who they are. That's the outcome of them. Look at what happened. And we get very lost in whatever that experience is, whatever that truth is. We're like, that's who my kid is, or that's what my work is. I've tried to do all these things and this is where they are. And really, that outcome is just a moment in time.
Yeah.
The outcome is not the outcome. It's just, this is a very, you kind of have to, this is kind of a very Zen idea. Like you kind of have to roll with us, like don't get too literal here, what we're talking about, because this is a perspective shift. That's the goal of this conversation is sometimes something will happen with our kids. Like say something really, sad happens. Your kid's in 5th or 6th grade, all their friends blow them off. And, they don't really know who they're going to hang out with anymore. Their friend group is gone or whatever. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is the end. My kid's not going to have friends, whatever. That outcome is not the outcome of their life.
Mhm.
That's a moment in time. And that experience is an outcome of that moment. Yes, we can get really, get into the layers of it, but that's not their full story.
Sure.
That's just an outcome right then. And sometimes we get lost in the set. Like the way I think about the outcome is not the outcome, is you have to have a balance in your perception, the ability to zoom in and zoom out. And let me give this as an example. If you zoom in too tightly to that outcome, you will be miserable if it's a negative outcome.
Yeah.
You will be like, I can't believe this happened. How did we get here? What are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? My kid's life is over. How are they ever going to get through this? You're too tight. You're suffering and you're in pain. If you zoom out too far, if you get too much of an expansive view where you're like, oh, big deal, it's a blip, there's a bit of spiritual bypassing there where you're not paying attention to that there really is an emotion.
There's something that needs attention.
Correct. And there's an experience that is important. It's just not everything. The outcome is not the outcome of this kid's life. So I kind of was thinking about it as far as a zoom lens. It's got to be a really balanced lens where you recognize that your kid is, we'll just stay with, the 6th grader whose friends blow them off, or they're feeling lost. And that is hard. And you want to be there for your kid, and you're not going to zoom out and go, oh, you'll be fine.
Yeah. You don't want to minimize it, and you don't want to
maximize
it. You want to just be in the moment as best you can. For some reason, I thought of, thinking about outcomes.
Yeah.
What I just wrote down is there is no end. Like there is no outcome. And the example I gave from a pop culturing perspective was River Phoenix's character in Stand By Me, Chris Chambers. He came from the bad family.
Yeah.
Chris made a lot of bad mistakes. Nobody liked Chris. And he's a fictional character, but he decided he was going to make something of his life. And he ended up becoming a lawyer and a really successful guy.
He did.
And a lot of people would just have this conclusion of this is who this kid's going to be.
Right.
And we could say that about all of our stuff. Like, oh, I am good at this, but I'm not good at that.